Hey everybody, CleanSpark just gave their mining update. I'm going to go over some good, go over some not so good, and I'm also going to give you kind of my expectations on where we're going to be at for our next earnings. Now, if you like these types of videos, make sure you hit the like, and if you're new here, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I definitely appreciate all your support. Now let's look at CleanSpark's update. And first off, some words from the CEO. Our background in energy efficiency gives us a clear advantage in the market as we make incremental improvements to our mining fleet. For example, this month we improved our efficiency by over 3% compared to December 2022 when we last reported these numbers in our quarterly report. So notice right there that they left out January, which was definitely a better month in terms of their mining. That progress, coupled with average wholesale power rates as low as 2 cents per kilowatt hour, has allowed us to increase our profit margins even as production compressed month over month, due to February being the shortest month of the year. Months like February are practice runs for halvings, and we intend to continue to test and deploy all hardware and software at our disposal in our bid to be the best prepared miner when halving happens next year. He also gives an update on Washington. Meanwhile, construction continues in Washington, where an additional 50 megawatts are set to go online in a few months. We are relying on everything we have learned in this space since constructing our very first mining campus in College Park as we build the Washington expansion. Our ability to constantly iterate, whether we are building air-cooled facilities or deploying latest gen immersion cooling, is built into the CleanSpark way. It's how we have managed to grow fast and reliably in a few short years since we entered the industry, and how we'll continue to grow well into our future. Now, looking at their mining update, if you guys have stuck around, if you guys have seen their last update, you'll notice that they mined considerably less Bitcoin than they did in January. And this is partly due to February being a shorter month. However, even if you added a couple days to February, they still wouldn't have beat their January numbers. They are mining right around 20 Bitcoin as seen right here, their average. So say February was 3 more days, they would be right around, somewhere around 650, which is a decrease month over month looking at their mining update. This is likely due to difficulty. And of course, January we saw a very efficient month where they are at like 98% efficiency. Now let's keep looking over these numbers and then I'll give you kind of my take on this. So their full year Bitcoin mined so far, 1,273. Their total Bitcoins as of February, 100. They did sell a little more than this 576. As you can see, they did convert 778 Bitcoin here. And you might look at that as a negative, which I sort of do, but you might look at this as a positive because this does mean they do have potential to beat their next earnings in terms of quarter over quarter revenue and also beat their year over year revenue and be at that record breaking revenue. But we do need one more month to kind of see where they're at there. But I think this is the goal of the execs here, to kind of get back to record breaking quarters instead of working more on holding Bitcoin, which I at this point would kind of prefer them to start holding more Bitcoin. Now they do have a currently deployed fleet of 66,900 of their miners with the hash rate of 6.6 exahash. And as I said, they converted 778 Bitcoin in February at an average of approximately 23,000 per Bitcoin compared to 19,000 in January. So they did sell their Bitcoin at a higher price than January, and they did actually sell more Bitcoin than they did in January. And I'll look over January in a second, but I'll just tell you off the bat, they mined more in January than they sold. So this is kind of a turnaround from what we saw in January. They actually sold more than they mined here. But I do think they're attempting to beat their all-time high in terms of revenue. Now, sales of Bitcoin gave them approximately nearly 18 million, 17.9, and we're going to do the math here on January and February and see what they need in March to actually have a record-breaking quarter. February daily Bitcoin mined averaged about 20.6, reached a high of 21.5. That, I believe, is a decrease month over month. Now let's add this 17.9 million to what they got in their last monthly update. And before I show you guys the math, which you can add in your head anyways, you'll see in January they sold their Bitcoin at approximately 19,000, and it made them nearly 12 million. 11.9 million is what they got for that. And their daily Bitcoin mined average was 22.5 with a high of 24. So they definitely decreased their daily average. So this doesn't really have to do with less days in the month because this is a daily average. Seems like difficulty is getting higher and maybe they had a few off days or something. And last thing here is in January they mined 697, whereas they did sell 624. So they were actually able to add some Bitcoin to their balance sheet in that month. Not in this month though, in February. And just doing some simple math, I didn't round these up. This is 17.9 plus 11.9 million. This was what they sold in January and February. They're looking at nearly 30 million, 29.8 million. So just looking at their last earnings, they're already going to be beating that revenue. So we are going to see already a quarterly increase in revenue. But what I'm really concerned with is seeing a year-over-year increase in revenue for the first time since this bear market. And they do need roughly 41.5 million here. They only need right around 11 or so million dollars to have a record-breaking quarter year over year. And that would actually be an all-time record quarter. And I do want you guys to think about this. For them to pull in that much revenue in March, consider first off that right now Bitcoin is still in the $22,000, $23,000 area. Maybe it does pull back. Maybe we see it come back down to 19,000 like we saw in January. And they can still easily have a record-breaking quarter. And one thing to consider here is they do have 100 Bitcoin on their balance sheet without not even counting what they actually mine in March. So perhaps by our March mining update, they will actually end up selling more than they mine again just to get really good numbers in terms of revenue, which I personally, am willing to wait a little while and see a record-breaking quarter in the next earnings, for example, if it means they can work on kind of holding their Bitcoin. To me, it's a little risky for them to just sell so much off their balance sheet. They don't have very much cash. And let's face it, we don't want dilution, but it is a possibility if things do get rough. I would personally prefer them to work on building their Bitcoin balance sheet up. So when, in my opinion, things start going up, which I think they are about to, and they are working their way up still, they will have a decent little balance of Bitcoin worth more than if they were to sell, throughout March, for example. But I do personally think that this is their goal, to have a year-over-year beat in revenue. And, you could say that's definitely a good thing. And I do agree, at least Wall Street will see that as a good thing, to see a year-over-year increase in revenue instead of a year-over-year decline for the first time in a long time since the bear market, actually. But you also got to think, if you're very bullish on Bitcoin, if you do believe Bitcoin by summer is going to, be dramatically higher in price, then you want them to hold as much Bitcoin as they can. But let me know what you think about this mining update. Are you a bit disappointed? Definitely not a good month compared to January, in terms of how much they mined. But the price that they sold at was an improvement. And of course, their revenue for this month was better than January. But that's due to them selling more Bitcoin than they actually mined, whereas January they mined more Bitcoin than they sold. So I do think the execs have a plan here, and they are working on seeing, that record-breaking quarter again. And I do think that's what they're more focused on right now, having actually good quarters instead of, building up their balance sheet as much as they can on Bitcoin. And, I don't want their strategy that they utilized throughout 2022 to hurt them in 2023 if they continue the strategy of, selling as much Bitcoin as possible to fund their growth. While yes, that is very important, I can see that, kind of biting them in the ass here if Bitcoin dramatically rises in price. Cleanspark won't be one that benefits as much as other miners that have a big Bitcoin balance. But that's just where I'm coming from here, just trying to give you my tangled up thoughts. Hopefully you got something out of this. Hopefully you can kind of see where I'm coming from here. I personally think it is good that they could see record-breaking quarters again. But as Bitcoin starts going up in price, I do want them to start holding more and more and more. But as we know, they have a lot of growth ahead of them to work on. They do have a 16 exahash goal. They're currently at 6.6, so they do need to gain a little less than 10 exahash. And I do expect that they're going to utilize that Bitcoin and potentially some dilution. If you're long on Cleanspark and you're looking at the company as a company and how they're going to succeed over 5 to 10 years, you might be okay with that, and I personally am. But if you are short term on this company, of course you don't want dilution. But those are things to consider. There is likely to be some dilution here, and that will make them a stronger company moving forwards. But there's always the possibility that Bitcoin goes up even higher in price, and they're able to just utilize that to continue to grow. But honestly, no one has the answer to that. But the point here is they do have a bunch of options, and they are going to make it through any sort of bear market that we see continue into 2023, while I do suspect 2022 was the worst year we're going to see until we turn around and get the next crypto winter after 2025. It is things to consider. If the market does turn back, fall considerably, it's possible that they dilute. It's possible that they, use up even more of their Bitcoin and dwindle down their balance sheet even more. So overall, you can get two things out of this. You can see that their mining update, we saw a decline in Bitcoin mined, and that's possibly why it's down a bit today. But you can also look at it from a revenue standpoint and see that they are likely to see record-breaking quarters again in this quarter. But thanks for watching, guys. Leave your thoughts down below. How do you feel about this Bitcoin mining update? And do you think they're going to see record-breaking quarters in terms of revenue again? And as a side note, I personally believe we don't even need Bitcoin to come up very much for them to see, profitable quarters again. I personally think a Bitcoin around 35K, they probably would be seeing profitable quarters, which is definitely a big difference from where they were in 2021 when they had a profitable quarter and Bitcoin was somewhere in the 50 to 60,000 range. So that's one thing to consider. They're going to be profitable with a Bitcoin price almost half of its previous high. So imagine where we are, towards the halving in 2024, going towards 2025. They're going to be well into profitability in my opinion. But let me know what you think about that down below. Thanks as always, guys, and see you in a little bit.